Mhm. Okay. So welcome to Philadelphia Walks PTSD. My name is Sharon Cole, or Sharon, or Cole, whatever you want to refer to me as. No big deal. Rat, pig, horse, cow, goat, dog, lizard, dinosaur. I've been called everything under the sun by people from different groups. Each of them seemingly maybe having a different definition for those words. So all those different good groups should get together and create like a dictionary, but they would wind up infighting and having a whole. So anyway, but in a good way, I don't care. So sticks and stones may break my bones, but words shall never hurt me. Of course, words can hurt people, and people do know how to use them with skill and a little bit of bullying and scratching, and that's how people wind up all bent out of shape and everything. So anyway, here we are on day 136, and lower brained people would say, well, that's part of life. You got to tough it up. Or higher brained people would say there's a way to finesse things or to communicate as best as possible so that people don't wind up on the defense and creating a war and so forth and so on. So anyway, it's day 136 on this one video each day, 365 days of my fundraising campaign, what have you, for life lost, stolen, robbed, and so forth and so on. Beginning the fourth Monday of January 2011. It has to do with extreme harassment. Some people call it gang stalking, mobbing, community harassment, orchestrated and organized harassment, haranguing, and so forth and so on. The layers can get really sophisticated and even worse and worse and worse, as opposed to just being bullied on the school ground kind of thing. It can get really bad, and if you're outnumbered by, technically, we could go into the hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands if you were to take into account the sheer population here in Philadelphia, beginning in 2011 or slightly before, and also a span of 12 to 13 years of people who they're addicted to orchestrating and setting people up. They've learned something, I guess, I don't know if they grew up in certain communities or even here in Philadelphia, they are used to timing and orchestrating things almost as if they're part of a mummers parade, but at least the mummers parade actually has a set date and they put on their show. But this is way worse, and it can get really sophisticated and into the scary realm because the intent seems to be to cause paranoia, even death, make someone go crazy, and so forth and so on. But I'll start off with my usual shtick here, which is the fourth Monday of January 2011. I was made to believe I'd be murdered in my apartment by a series of orchestrated events. My brain was so far from even believing that people would set people up that I had to realize over time, like, people were actually willing to set that up. They were actually willing to do this. And then I had to get used to people will actually come out and stage events or create street theater, but not cute, fun street theater like in New York where somebody's practicing their mime or whatever. This would be an actual all-out assault through psychological terror. I 100% believe that I'd be murdered that evening. It was so bad. I couldn't even speak. I was terrorized to the point of I was trembling, convulsing, couldn't hold my phone. It took me a minute or two before I could finally get to make a sound out of my mouth. I called my sister first. She convinced me to finally call police. I called her first because I didn't even believe that if I called the police that it would go to the police. I believed that it would be rerouted through the CIA. So I don't know if that's a thought that could be sent in. So I don't know if the powers that be wanted me to wait to call police or call my sister first or what have you. So anyway, say an entire family has been surrounded by uncool people, and in a way, having me reach out to certain people helped people figure out what was going on the outskirts. So it would be like no one's fault necessarily in their family, regardless of whatever lifestyle people wind up in. It could be that really bad people glommed on to the family, dating as far back as to the early 60s. So anyway, with that said, as if that weren't enough, being scared, SHITLESS, out of my apartment. The games commenced after that, and people who I thought were friends who I'd met up leading up to this date, they all behaved in the opposite way than those of the neighborhood would purport. Because at the time, I was a full-on card-carrying member of the LGBT community, and was participating in a lot of things: a running group, Team Philadelphia, front runners, dragon boat racing, all kinds of stuff, Sapphire Fund. So I volunteered, I participated, and all these people would, appear to be healthy, no major issues unless they're part of criminal rings secretly at a higher level so that it's not obvious. I will say this: for people who obviously have issues, at least it's showing and they don't hide. I'm dealing with people who have hidden so much and looks really good on the outside. Their veneers look really good. And you would just assume, oh my God, they're so cool and healthy and da-da-da. Meanwhile, criminals who assassinate people through psychological torture and possibly other means of being able to control people's actions. It is disturbing. And I believe there's actually technology out there or capabilities of powers that be or giants. And if you're a perceived enemy or the opposition of their factions and they need to get rid of you because you're just an inconvenience, then maybe they can find a way. So that's just my take on that. But these people, normally in the neighborhood, a supportive person or people will say, oh my God, that's so, what happened? If I were to call them and say this crazy thing happened in my apartment, one would hope that someone out of 20 people would say, are you okay? Like, what was it? What do you think it was? Do you want us to hang out? Do you want to hang out at our place for a while? You're welcome to sort of hang out as long as possible. We'll come back with you to your apartment, so you don't feel alone for a while. Like, we'll keep walking you back when we can, or what have you. None of that. In fact, I got the opposite of, is it your perception or reality? And that's a straight on line from something that I wrote in an article for a company that I worked both on staff for and freelance. And I was like, they just picked that up, either that imprinted on their brain, or they picked it. People are using material that I put out there and they use it in order to like freak people out. So they weave it into their conversations or desperately work hard to try to figure out, how can I fit that line into a conversation with Sharon just to creep her out? That's a lot of work, I think. So anyway, why not just create your own writing instead of trying to lift mine in order to sound smart? So anyway, but with that said, I will talk about a very specific example of one of the experiences of gang stalking that I had to endure. And that would be that there was, I forget what year it was, but there were clients of mine who had a cat that I took care of. And this would be a gay male couple who lived in the Symphony House, Tom and John. And they had decided over the years to like somewhat befriend me. And every once in a while they would call up or email and say, hey, you want to go out to dinner? We're going to do this. Or, hey, you want to go over to Jen Sheehy's or whatever? We're going to have cheese and wine and crackers and stuff like that. That was the night of the Bataclan. That's a different video, which I already talked about, because music was used to help people realize it was time to leave Jen's and go back home. But anyway, and I realized that they listened to the music because I kept hearing music as like signals, like this is a signal that you need to leave. It would be a song like, with Get Out in it or whatever. And I realized that other people were listening to music as a directive. So in a way, it validated my experience. But anyway, we'll backtrack here. So in fact, it was those two guys, Tom and John, and they had gotten married like a year prior, and they were having an anniversary. And this is all entwined around the entire, whatever you call it, passing of the laws for same-sex marriages and stuff like that. So I was happy to show up. I had a lot of dog walks and cat visits. I was happy to show up. I knew that on some level I would feel like the single dog walker who should, even though I have a lot of experience behind me besides dog walking, I have writing and so on. In fact, one couple in the marriage was also kind of highly skilled in writing. He wrote corporate communications for a local business somewhere here. So anyway, I'll have to look into that again for a job. But he didn't work there? Okay, so anyway, So we all meet at the Symphony House, and they have a special room that you can rent out. And this is the Symphony House on South Broad, Gamble and Huff. There used to be a Starbucks catty cornered from the Symphony House, and it's all near the University of the Arts, like at least one of the buildings, and so forth and so on. So, I was having a fairly good time. They did get a good crowd. They volunteer in, with a lot of groups in the LGBT community and have a presence and so forth and so on. So, just having like hors d'oeuvres and maybe a little wine and sort of this outer room, which was outside of the dining room, which had like a long table. And I was enjoying myself. In fact, ran into Jen, who was also there. Jen was another client of mine who had a cat also. All of them had cats. So, and, talked to her a little bit. She brought a newfound boyfriend named Lance. And he was super tall, and she's like kind of on the short. She might be even like an inch shorter than me. I'm about 5'2". So we're all talking, and there's a bunch of people there, and I met like one or two other people. Oh, how do you know Tom and John, and blah blah blah, and so forth and so on. And that lasted like a little over an hour, and then all of a sudden they sort of like rang the glasses or whatever and said, "Okay, dinner's going to be served. We're going to head on in. If you want to stay for dinner, this is where we're seated, and this is what they're serving." And of course, they did, except for maybe a side salad. They were I think they were serving meat anyway, and I'm a full-on vegetarian, almost vegan. And I think Jen said something. She said something that insinuated that the whole dinner would be watched, as if it were going to be on camera for someone, or she had to throw it in. So she was someone who always had a little zinger of a thing to say, which usually kind of spoiled or ruined the experience. And at the time, I had felt exploited enough, and I was like, there were a whole bunch of things that came in that would make me not want to stay for the dinner, even though I kind of did, just because it was nice to be social, and to not feel alone and so forth, and have friends and all that stuff. But on the other hand, it was enough for me to wonder about whether I felt like staying. And I was always like kind of PTSD'd out and like highly anxious all the time. So it's like I wanted to go anyway for all this energy. While I was there, I also met the sister of Tom, one of the groomsmen, and her name was Tami. And she had a Southern accent, from Texas. So she was someone who would say like, "Oh, stay cute and nice," or whatever, like stay nice. And so, but she was a really sweet woman. She was there with her son, I guess, or I forget who she was there with, but and I think they were from Houston. So the interesting thing is, Tom and John and Jen had moved to Philadelphia from living in Houston for many years. I think Tom was originally from Houston. John was originally from Southern Delaware, but wound up in Houston because he worked for Shell, Shell as an executive down there. And Jen had been living in Houston, and she lived in the Symphony House for a while before moving up to American Lofts, and then later Old World Lofts over by Johnny Brenda's, like in that vicinity. So she was in 3 different places in a short period of time. So anyway, I decided to go ahead and leave. So like, "Oh, thank you for coming, blah, blah, blah," and so on and so on. I feel like I had other walks to worry about anyway. So it was like kind of a thing, like if I had stayed, then I would have worried about hurrying up and getting to other walks. I kind of can't remember, but I know that I rode my bike back to my apartment. And as I pulled up to my apartment, I saw a couple Superman shirts. And at the time, Superman and Batman shirts were out all the time. And are you a Superman person or a Batman person? Which is the dark and which is the light? They kind of played it off that way. But as I walked up to my apartment, someone whisked by with a Superman shirt, and kind of the implication was, and I actually got this message because I wouldn't think of it, because I actually was like torn about whether to stay or leave. But the camera comment was enough for me to sort of tip me on the edge of leaving. But the Superman shirt, was the implication with this guy was, "Good job, congratulations, thank you. You were, thank you, Superman," as if I were the Superman for actually having showed up to begin with. The implication was, "Thank you for doing your duty of actually showing up. We know this was an obligation. This was a hard thing for you to do." Like, it goes into the realm of like, who would want to go for this case, it felt like who would want to show up there? I mean, oh my God, with all the things that they do and how they're being, jackasses or exploiting people. So you are Superman for our team, took one for the team, and you showed up there. It's in that realm. The thing is, I actually was kind of okay with showing up there, but the other implication would be I tended to be a very independent, isolated person who, with a writing career from before, had a hard time like finding people to connect with or network with, because writing can sort of force people into an isolated mode. So, and also I grew up in such a way that it's not like I had a huge network or whatever. So the other implication would be, oh, we got quiet Sharon, non-social Sharon to actually show up. Thing is, I always wanted to be social, but only in a safe way. I've been in social environments where I always felt like the little peon or exploited, or the servant or what have you. So it's like, how can I show? My thing was, how can I find my equals and people who treat me with respect, and then show up to a social gathering in that regard? Because that was hard for me to find in life. So anyway, I didn't feel like belittled or anything in Tom and John's presence. It was more little pipsqueak peanut gallery girl Jen had to say something, or somehow she said something that implied that the dinner there would be cameras. I don't know why it sort of came from her, but I kind of forget. It's been many years now. But to add to that, and this is part of the secret messaging of Philadelphia, and they had tons of Superman versus Batman people walking around. And I don't think it's just because of the movies. I know they had the movies come out, the Batman one and all that stuff, but there's more to it. Because it's like, how many people are willing to actually buy these shirts in a small concentrated area and walk around on purpose? Philly is in between the size of, Philly's like smaller than Chicago, smaller than New York. So it's small enough to be like, are you kidding? How many people are willing to do that? Be willing to do this? So anyway, after having met Tami, and I thought she was super nice, and with her, stay cute, stay nice kind of voice, I would walk around and I would see a ton of license plates, and often on South Street by Miles Table, and usually there's something that's going on around there, but saw license plate that had STY. So there used to be either one car that actually had STY, CTE, like stay cute, or STY became a prefix, because sometimes on license plates during certain time periods, you will see the same three letters show up over and over again if you're a state that uses letters and then numbers. Like here, we use three letters and then some numbers, I think. In Delaware, they use all numbers. But in Pennsylvania, they use letters and numbers. In New Jersey, I think they use letters. Either you use letters and letters or letters and numbers. But point being, the first three letters. So Delaware doesn't have the same system. But Philly, all of Pennsylvania has a system where they use letters. In fact, in Georgia, they use PNC as. So if you bank at PNC, if you see a PNC license plate in Georgia, you'll be like, that's part of the messaging system. Or it could affect you in a certain way. Like say you have a deadbeat cousin who has a license plate that says PNC, and you're like, I just started banking at PNC because I wanted to leave a credit union for various reasons. And that sucks because I don't want to be in line with their messaging system. I'm a totally different person, and I don't want them to feel like they won or that they're above me or this, that, and the other. So see how that can all play in together. But anyway, I would see STY everywhere. And I think there was a car that had like style cute, like it kind of implied that. But I never saw those cars until after she showed up. And I was like, now they're going to have STY letters on license plates just in time for someone who actually has this accent to show up at a party where I would meet her. So that's it. That's day 136. Superman and stay cute. And what did it all mean? And who are these people who walk around playing into the message system a little too much to the point where it gets absurd, annoying, frustrating, or it can get worse than that, where you're like, that's kind of an okay-ish experience, but it's still weird and creepy when you realize someone seemingly knew when I was going to come home in order to show up. And walk by with his shirt. And it is like that. It happens everywhere. And it's like, these people, even if I spontaneously leave an anniversary party without knowing, someone out there would know, and they would make sure they showed up to walk past me wherever I would go to send this sort of message. The thing is, you're like, well, I'm not friends with any of these people. I have no idea. I don't know why they're doing it, and I don't know where their messages come from. And for that matter, if people are going to send messages, innuendo, nuance, whatever, pay me already. Okay, so especially for that first night is worth between $5 and $10 million. The first night that I was scared out of my apartment, and they know it. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, bye bye.